Welcome to Weekly Reflections. I'm Corey. I'm joined again by Megan and Brandon. Thank you all for joining us. And May 3rd, cleaning house. Somehow, being alone with God doesn't seem as embarrassing as facing up to another person. Until we actually sit down and talk aloud about what we have so long hidden, our willingness to clean house is still largely theoretical. That's from the 12 and 12, page 60. It wasn't unusual for me to talk to God and myself about my character defects, but to sit down face to face and openly discuss these intimacies with another person was much more difficult. I recognized in the experience, however, a similar relief to the one I had experienced when I first admitted I was an alcoholic. I began to appreciate the spiritual significance of the program and that this step was just an introduction to what was yet to come in the remaining 7 steps.
So the 5th step.
Super fun, right?
Yeah. A couple months ago, I was asked to speak at this meeting on the 5th step, and I realized that I didn't even know what to say. I had no idea what to say. It was like this 25-minute share on my experience through the 5th step. So I really dived into the 12 and 12. I dived into the big book. The big book doesn't have a lot to say, like in the grand scheme of things on the 5th step. But what it does say is that if we a self-appraisal isn't enough. Right. You know, and I think that it goes along those lines. Somehow being alone with God doesn't seem as embarrassing as facing up to another person. The principle behind the 5th step is humility. And we have to humble ourselves. And I think that that's the whole point of this step is it's not so much the things that we necessarily talk about, because they're not that different than what anyone else did, you know. But it's the humility that comes with the 5th step of sitting across. I remember sitting across from a table with my sponsor, and my sponsor was a little different than most. I would read off something I did, and he'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you did that?" And then he'd be like, "Well, it's not that bad, actually. I'm just kidding." You know, he's like, "I did the same thing," but it was a little odd to talk about all those things at first. But I'm so glad that I did it, because it was probably one of the most freeing steps out of all 12 of them. I felt like I was finally at a point where I could move past the problem of drinking, and it showed me even more that drinking wasn't really the problem. The book tells us that drinking is just a symptom of our problem, that we're the actual problem. And I learned all my character defects doing that 5th step. And they're glaring. They come to me every single day. But just like it says, I did begin to appreciate the spiritual significance of this program, because I was finally able to feel something that wasn't guilt, shame, and remorse. You know, I was able to feel like I could finally relate to someone else. They accepted me for who I was after I just told them everything I had done in my life that I was so ashamed of and that I drank over for so many years. After doing that, the rest of them didn't seem that difficult.
I didn't like doing the 5th step, which is, I know, a really profound statement. But
it's real.
Yeah.
It's true, right?
And what I didn't like was, and I didn't realize this at the time, but it was the first time that I had to reconcile who I really was against who I thought I was and wanted to be. And it turns out those are 2 very different people. The person I thought I was isn't that bad. The person I really was, the person written down in my 4-step, is kind of a terrible person. And like you were saying, there was this huge fear of judgment. You know, someone's going to know. And it turns out most of the things that came up in my 5th step, somebody else already knows. Somebody else was already hurt by what I had done, you know. And they have no illusions about my part in that. Whereas I have all kinds of delusions about how this wasn't really my fault. They forced my hand. I went through that whole thing. I talked to my sponsor. The first time I ever did a 5th step, really, it was quite a while ago, and I left out all the things, like you were saying, it was the whole principle is humility. I left out all the things I was embarrassed about.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite ready to be humble and like just admit who I really was. And I added in a whole bunch of stuff that I thought would impress this other guy. This like 55-year-old man who's taking time out of his Sunday to come hang out with me. I'm 19 at the time, and I live in a halfway house, and I'm trying to look cool, and it didn't go well. Like it even talks about in the big book that afterward you kind of feel like this weight is lifted. You've accomplished something, and I didn't feel that, and I was very weird. I got jaded to the whole thing because obviously they're lying about this. Never mind that I had just told a whole bunch of lies, so it clearly didn't work.
Yeah.
And then years later, I did it again, and I told the truth. And I didn't feel great afterward. All this was out there. But within a few hours, I really believed that I could actually deal with cleaning up this wreckage that I had caused.
Yeah.
I knew that was a little ways away, but
Yeah.
I could accomplish that. And for all the hype, for all the buildup, for all the fear I put into being ahead of the fifth step, once it was over, all of that fear was unfounded. It was not nearly as bad as I had built it up in my head to be. I'm out of stuff to say.
And I'm out. The fifth step, in my first year getting sober, I had the opportunity to do multiple fourth and fifth steps. The very first version was writing out this autobiography, kind of what got me there, and initially, because for the same reasons everyone fears doing that fourth step, I suppose. I thought of all the reasons I can't do this. My memory's shot. I don't actually know what I have done. It's bits and pieces. It's very scattered. As I don't know about for you guys, but I tend to have a very, very short-term memory, and especially when it comes to pain or hurt or anything dishonest that I've done, those just get pushed right out, and I had to go and break these up into increments of my life and kind of look at all the way as far back in childhood as I could remember, because I didn't just turn into an addict when I picked up. I've had these tendencies my whole life. And writing that stuff down is important. When they say repeatedly that to get this stuff in black and white, it's necessary. And the same as us sharing this with another person, because I know what I've done. I know today what I've done. And my higher power definitely knows what I've done, because he's just been watching the whole thing play out. Yeah. But something about telling that honestly to another person, I did just like what Corey said. I was very selective, so I did several fourth steps and fifth steps. So each time I got a little braver. And each time I said, okay, well, maybe I'll try this out on you. I'm gonna see how this goes. I'm gonna see what facial expression I get when I tell you this one. And it was never what I expected it to be on the other end. Because I have been shaming myself for so long and feeling like I'm always carrying that elephant, just those stupid secrets, man. And the idea of just saying it gets easier even just to say it, just to say those things that, guess what, somebody else has done, and they've done worse, and they've done more. And that's why we all relate to each other, that's how we all understand each other. I've gotten to disclose these things and then finally get a little more brave and a little more brave. And then like Corey said, the difference between when you're being fully honest, because you feel it. And I didn't really feel it. I felt a little relief. And then I thought, I knew there was that voice, that nagging voice that said, you know, there's more.
Yeah.
You know, there's more. And then I went through more, and as I went through the steps, I was able to release a lot of this stuff. And the thing with cleaning house, that's in our 3 must-dos, you know?
Yeah.
We have to trust God. We have to clean house. And then we work with others. And that's what gives us this life. And even though that comes second on my to-do list, it's something I have to do and I have to continually do. And I'm never going to be done with, because I'm never going to be perfect. You know, I'm going to continue to wrong people. Mm-hmm. I'm wrong at least once every day. I say that every day. And thank God for being aware of these character defects. Thank God that I have been shown these things, because now I get to work on them. I get to improve. I get to be, you know, Megan 2.0 or whatever comes next. I don't know. But I'm super grateful for this step. And I hope everyone else can kind of overcome that fear as well. Yeah.
And, you know, thank you, Megan, for being here. Thank you, Brandon, once again. Thank you all for joining us. And if what we just talked about sounds terrifying, rest assured, it's not the first thing you have to do. We can help you get to the point where you're willing to do this. Just look us up on detox2rehab.com. Call one of our specialists. They can get you pointed in the right direction. We'll see you again next week for more fun stuff.